January 29th, 1945. The Belgian village of Holzheim lay buried under fresh snow. First Sergeant Leonard Funk turned the corner of a stone farmhouse and his body locked in place. Before him stood 90 German soldiers. Half of them clutched weapons in their hands. The others reached down, snatching rifles from a mound on the frozen ground. 4 American soldiers knelt in the white powder, arms clasped behind their skulls. These same Germans had been captives mere minutes ago, 80 of them seized by Funk's unit during the village assault. Only 4 guards could be allocated to watch them. Now those prisoners stood free, rearmed and preparing to strike Company C from the rear. A German commanding officer moved forward and jammed an MP-40 submachine gun into Funk's abdomen, bellowing in his native tongue. Funk understood no German, neither did his fellow Americans. The officer bellowed again, his volume climbing, his complexion darkening to crimson. Funk surveyed the 90 Germans, surveyed his 4 stripped soldiers, surveyed the MP-40 digging into his belly, and began to laugh. The German officer's expression contorted with bewilderment, then fury. He bellowed harder. Funk laughed louder. The sequence that followed consumed fewer than 60 seconds. 21 Germans would perish. The survivors would cast down their arms and capitulate, and Leonard Funk would receive the Medal of Honor for one of the most audacious combat actions in the Second World War, all triggered by uncontrollable laughter. Leonard Alfred Funk, Jr. entered the world on August 27, 1916, in Braddock Township, Pennsylvania. The town survived on steel, smokestacks, and foundries stretching along the Monongahela River, 8 miles from Pittsburgh's center. Funk matured quickly and shouldered responsibility young. By his 1934 high school graduation, he'd been caring for his younger sibling for years. The Great Depression ground through its 5th brutal year. Employment was sparse. Higher education remained a dream beyond reach. June 1941 brought war consuming Europe and Asia, and Congress expanded conscription. Funk's lottery number surfaced. He appeared at the induction facility in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. 24 years old, 5 feet 5 inches in height, 140 pounds in weight. The Army medical officer likely envisioned desk assignments. That prediction proved false. Funk requested the paratroopers. In 1941, American airborne divisions hardly existed. The strategy was untested, leaping from functional aircraft to descend behind hostile lines and engage while encircled. Most soldiers considered it suicidal. The volunteers represented a distinct category. Airborne preparation was engineered to crush spirits. 5 weeks of merciless physical training eliminated half the applicants. Then arrived the jump towers, followed by actual aircraft. That first moment, stepping from a C-47 at 1,200 feet, every instinct commanded you to seize the doorframe and refuse release. Funk secured his jump wings and received assignment to Company C, 1st Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment. The 508th deployed to England in late 1943, merging with the 82nd Airborne Division. These troops had already conducted combat jumps in Sicily and Italy. They'd already taken lives and witnessed comrades fall. Funk arrived as the replacement, 27 years old, practically elderly by paratrooper measures. Most squadmates barely reached 20, yet Funk possessed qualities they lacked: maturity, composure, speed, the variety of silent capability that compels men to follow you toward death. By D-Day, he commanded a squad. June 6, 1944, at 1:30 in the morning. Darkness, Funk's C-47 vibrated as flak detonated in proximity. He stood in formation, the column of paratroopers awaiting the jump, with 60 pounds of gear fastened to his frame. The aircraft flew at 400 feet, dangerously low for safe deployment, but the pilots couldn't gain altitude. German anti-aircraft batteries covered the sky. The green signal activated. Funk jumped. The D-Day airborne deployment became chaos instantly. German defensive fire had dispersed the formations across 50 miles of French terrain. Paratroopers descended into flooded farmland and drowned beneath their equipment's mass. Others touched down inside German encampments and died before cutting free from their harnesses. Funk struck Earth hard. His ankle rolled on impact, severely sprained, possibly fractured. Every stride would be torture for the following 2 weeks. But he retained mobility. He retained combat capability, and nothing else mattered. He was 40 miles from his designated drop zone, 40 miles of enemy-controlled territory in pitch darkness, isolated. Within hours, he'd assembled a group of scattered paratroopers, 18 eventually, all seeking leadership. Funk provided it. For 10 days, Funk guided this team through German-occupied views. Ground, moving under darkness, concealing themselves by daylight, engaging when necessary. He demanded to serve as forward scout despite his damaged ankle, positioning himself in maximum danger to shield his troops. They reconnected with Allied units on June 17th. Every individual survived. 0 casualties. 10 days behind hostile lines, 40 miles of German-dominated France, and Leonard Funk delivered them all safely. He collected the Silver Star, a Bronze Star for outstanding service, and his initial Purple Heart. Funk was merely beginning. September 17, 1944, delivered Operation Market Garden, history's largest airborne operation. 35,000 paratroopers descended into the Netherlands to seize a sequence of bridges. Success demanded velocity, surprise, flawless execution. Everything failed. But Leonard Funk remained ignorant of the larger picture. He understood only his objective. Following touchdown, Funk observed something absent from the operational plan. 3 German 20mm flak weapons were bombarding incoming Allied gliders, transporting reinforcements and provisions. If those weapons continued firing, hundreds would die before reaching ground. The gun emplacement occupied fortified high ground with approximately 20 German soldiers operating the systems. Funk commanded 3 men. Conventional military doctrine requires 3-to-1 numerical superiority to storm a prepared defensive position. Funk faced the inverse. He was outnumbered 7-to-1. He attacked regardless. Advancing at the forefront, Funk and his 3-man element assaulted the German emplacement. They eliminated the security detachment, overran the gun positions, destroyed all 3 weapons and their operators. 20 Germans, 3 Americans. The weapons fell silent. The gliders landed without incident. For this engagement, Funk earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest decoration for valor. He now possessed a Silver Star and a DSC, 2 of the most uncommon combat decorations in American military service. Funk remained unfinished. December 16, 1944, the Germans initiated their final desperate campaign. 3 armies, 400,000 troops, 1,400 armored vehicles smashed through American defensive lines in the Ardennes forest. The Battle of the Bulge became the largest engagement the American Army would conduct in the Second World War. The conditions were punishing. Snow, ice, temperatures plunging to 5 degrees below freezing. Soldiers froze to death in their fighting positions. Then Malmedy happened. December 17th, 1 day into the offensive, 113 Americans surrendered to an SS armored combat group. They were assembled in a farmer's field near a junction. Arms raised, weapons confiscated, prisoners of war. Then the SS commenced firing. 84 Americans died in that location, executed like livestock. The information circulated through the American Army. Normandy transformed everything. American troops vowed they'd never capitulate to the SS. When Funk learned of the massacre, something solidified within him. Leonard Funk determined he would never surrender to the Germans. That resolution would prove significant very shortly. January 29, 1945, Company C received orders to capture the Belgian village of Holzheim. A complication existed. Company C operated under strength. Funk, now serving as acting executive officer, examined his diminished roster and reached a decision. He walked to the company headquarters tent where administrative personnel, logistics staff, and food service workers who typically never encountered combat were laboring. "You're all infantry today," Funk informed them. "Collect your weapons. We're securing that village." The advance to Holzheim covered 15 miles through waist-deep snow in a howling blizzard. Funk led from the vanguard. They reached Holzheim and stormed the village. 15 structures, Germans defending every one. Funk and his troops cleared them completely. 30 prisoners secured. Not one American casualty. Another element captured 50 additional Germans on the village's opposite side. 80 prisoners total, assembled in the courtyard of a farmhouse. Funk surveyed his depleted men. They'd been marching and fighting for hours. Resistance persisted in other village sections. He could allocate only 4 men to guard the captives. "Maintain them here," he instructed the guards. "We'll dispatch reinforcements when available." Funk returned to the fighting, completely unaware of what was about to unfold behind him. While Funk was clearing Holzheim's remainder, a German patrol neared the farmhouse. 10 or 20 troops wearing white camouflage wrappings. In the snow and disorder, they appeared nearly identical to American forces in winter equipment. The 4 guards failed to recognize the threat until too late. The Germans subdued them, stripped them of weapons, forced them to kneel. Then they liberated the prisoners. 90 men total seized weapons from the collection. They organized rapidly, plotting to strike Company C from behind. That's when Leonard Funk rounded the corner. He'd returned to check on the prisoners routinely to verify the guards' status. He turned the farmhouse corner and froze solid. His 4 guards knelt in the snow. The prisoners who should be weaponless and secured stood everywhere, rifles grasped in their hands, organizing for combat. The German officer identified Funk immediately and strode forward, jamming his MP-40 into Funk's abdomen, screaming a demand in German to surrender. Except Funk comprehended no German. The officer screamed again, louder still, his face crimson, veins protruding in his neck. Funk looked around. 90 Germans, half-armed. His 4 men stripped and powerless. The mathematics of survival equaled 0. No scenario existed where Leonard Funk prevailed in this confrontation. The logical action, the reasonable action, surrender. But Funk recalled Normandy, 84 Americans murdered in a field, shot like beasts. He'd already resolved he'd never capitulate to the Germans. So instead of complying, Leonard Funk did something incomprehensible. He began laughing. Nobody knows precisely why Funk laughed. Perhaps it was theater, a calculated maneuver to disorient the enemy and purchase time. Perhaps it was psychological stress. The human mind produces peculiar reactions when confronting certain death. Perhaps it was authentic amusement at the absurdity of an officer screaming in an incomprehensible language. Funk himself later stated he attempted to stop laughing but couldn't manage it. Whatever the explanation, the impact was catastrophic. The German officer screamed louder. Funk laughed harder, doubling over, shoulders convulsing. Some German soldiers began laughing too. The officer was turning violet with rage. For several critical seconds, the German officer couldn't determine his response. Leonard Funk exploited those seconds. Still appearing to laugh, Funk gradually reached up toward his Thompson submachine gun suspended over his shoulder. The German officer observed, assuming the American was finally relinquishing his weapon. Funk's hand closed around the handle. He started to unsling it gradually, deliberately. The German relaxed marginally. Then Funk moved in one motion, faster than conscious thought. He swung the Thompson down, aligned the barrel, and compressed the trigger. The initial burst struck the German officer in the torso. 30 rounds in fewer than 3 seconds. The officer was deceased before contacting the ground. Funk didn't pause. He rotated, continuing fire. The Thompson sprayed an arc of ammunition across the German soldiers closest to him. Men shrieked. Men collapsed. Blood scattered across the snow. The magazine emptied. Funk extracted the depleted magazine, inserted a fresh one, chambered a round, and continued shooting. Simultaneously, he was shouting at his men, "Grab their weapons!" The 4 guards scrambled for the rifles the fallen Germans had released. The Germans descended into chaos. Their officer was dead. Nobody issued commands for this situation. Some returned fire. 1 round killed the soldier positioned beside Funk. Funk continued firing, repositioning, killing. His guards now possessed weapons and were shooting too. 60 seconds. That's the complete duration. 21 German soldiers sprawled dead in the snow. 24 more suffered wounds. The remainder, more than 40, had cast down their weapons and elevated their hands. Leonard Funk stood amid the carnage, smoke rising from his Thompson, encircled by bodies. That, he told his men, was the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. The account spread through the regiment, through the division, through the entire 82nd Airborne, the sergeant who laughed at 90 Germans and eliminated half with a Tommy gun. When the Medal of Honor recommendation arrived in Washington, nobody challenged it. September 5, 1945, at the White House, President Harry Truman placed the Medal of Honor around Leonard Funk's neck. "I would prefer to possess this medal," Truman declared, "than serve as President of the United States." Let's tally what Leonard Funk earned throughout the Second World War. Medal of Honor for Holzheim. Distinguished Service Cross for the anti-aircraft weapons in Holland. Silver Star for guiding 18 men through 40 miles of hostile territory in Normandy. Bronze Star for outstanding service. Purple Heart? 3 of them. He sustained wounds 3 separate times and continued fighting. Plus foreign honors from France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Leonard Funk stands as the most decorated paratrooper of the Second World War. 5 feet 5 inches tall, 140 pounds, a former retail clerk who became legendary. The war concluded. Funk returned home. He didn't author a book, didn't join the lecture circuit, didn't transform his Medal of Honor into a speaking career or political position. He returned to Pennsylvania and secured employment with the Veterans Administration, assisting other veterans navigate the bureaucracy, processing disability applications, cutting through administrative barriers for men who'd sacrificed everything. The identical category of clerical work he performed before the war. For 27 years, Leonard Funk occupied a desk and aided veterans. His wife Gertrude remained with him throughout everything. They raised 2 daughters. They resided in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, a working-class neighborhood in a working-class town near his childhood home. The Medal of Honor hung in a display case somewhere alongside the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, all the foreign honors. He never discussed them. When people inquired about Holzheim, about the laughter, about the 90 Germans, he dismissed it. Did what was required, that's all. That's his only statement ever. November 20th, 1992, Leonard Alfred Funk, Jr. died of cancer. He was 76 years old. They interred him at Arlington National Cemetery, among the heroes of every American conflict. At his death's time, he was the final surviving Medal of Honor recipient from the 82nd Airborne Division in the Second World War. Here's what Leonard Funk's story teaches us. War doesn't favor the large or the powerful or the careless or the fearless. War favors those who continue thinking when everyone else has ceased. At Holzheim, Leonard Funk possessed every justification to surrender. The mathematics were impossible. 90 against 1. A weapon in his abdomen. His troops already captured. Any rational individual would have capitulated. But Funk wasn't considering the mathematics. He was considering Malmedy, about 84 Americans murdered in a field. He was considering his men, the 4 guards on their knees, the soldiers distributed across the village who would be struck from behind if these Germans escaped. So he laughed, perhaps as theater, perhaps from stress, perhaps because the entire situation struck him as absurd. And while the German officer was confused, while everyone was unbalanced, Leonard Funk executed his move. 60 seconds later, he stood in a field of corpses, alive when he should have been deceased. Consider what President Truman stated on September 5, 1945, in the White House Rose Garden. The most powerful man on earth, the man who had just concluded the Second World War, observing a 5'5" former retail clerk from Pennsylvania and declaring, "I'd prefer to be you." Because what Truman comprehended, what everyone who examines the Medal of Honor citations comprehends, is that courage isn't about size or strength or training. Courage is what you do when there's a weapon in your abdomen and 90 men want you deceased. The story of Leonard Funk represents more than military history. It demonstrates that heroism doesn't require physical advantages or extensive preparation. What it requires is the capacity to act when action seems futile, to think when thought seems pointless, to laugh when laughter seems insane. Consider the weight of that moment at Holzheim. 90 armed men, 1 small American with a gun pressed against his stomach. The odds were mathematically impossible. Every calculation suggested death. Every rational analysis recommended surrender. But Leonard Funk had made his decision weeks earlier, hearing about Malmedy, about 84 Americans shot in a field like animals. He'd made his decision then. Never surrender. Not to them. Not ever. That decision shaped everything that followed. When the German officer screamed commands, Funk couldn't understand. Funk had already decided the outcome. He wasn't going to raise his hands. He wasn't going to kneel in the snow beside his 4 guards. He was going to fight, and he was probably going to die. But he was going to take as many Germans with him as possible. The laughter was just the mechanism. The decision was already made. What makes Funk's story remarkable isn't just the violence or the victory. It's the choice. Every soldier faces moments of decision in combat. Most of those moments involve following orders, executing training, doing what you've been taught to do. But Holzheim wasn't that kind of moment. Holzheim was a moment where all the training, all the orders, all the doctrine pointed toward surrender. And Leonard Funk chose something else. Think about what happened in those 60 seconds. Funk drew his Thompson while appearing to surrender it. He killed the German officer before anyone could react. He pivoted and fired, killing more Germans in the immediate vicinity. His magazine emptied. He reloaded under fire. He kept shooting. His 4 guards, responding to his shouted commands, grabbed weapons from dead Germans and joined the fight. The Germans, leaderless and shocked, broke. Some returned fire. Some froze. Some dropped their weapons immediately. Within 60 seconds, the battle was over. 21 Germans dead. 24 wounded. More than 40 surrendered. The tactical analysis is straightforward. Funk achieved surprise through misdirection. The laughter created confusion. The sudden violence created shock. The death of the German officer eliminated command and control. The rapid, sustained fire created casualties faster than the Germans could organize a response. By the time they recovered from the initial shock, the equation had changed. Instead of 90 armed Germans against 1 American, it was 45 confused Germans against 5 Americans with proven willingness to fight to the death. The Germans chose survival. But the tactical analysis misses the essential truth. Leonard Funk won at Holzheim because he'd already accepted death. The Germans were trying to survive. Funk had moved beyond survival into something else. Call it vengeance. Call it duty. Call it whatever you want. He wasn't trying to live through Holzheim. He was trying to kill as many Germans as possible before they killed him. That mindset gave him an advantage no tactical manual discusses. When you've already accepted death, you act without hesitation. You don't calculate odds. You don't consider alternatives. You just act. The Germans at Holzheim were trying to recapture their freedom, to rejoin their units, to survive the war. Reasonable goals, human goals. Leonard Funk was trying to kill them all before they killed him. Unreasonable goal, inhuman goal. But in that moment, with that German officer screaming and that MP-40 pressed against his stomach, Funk's unreasonable goal gave him the split-second advantage he needed. While the German officer tried to understand why this American was laughing, Funk was reaching for his Thompson. While the officer tried to restore order and control, Funk was killing him. President Truman understood this when he said he'd rather have the Medal of Honor than be president. Truman had made the decision to use atomic weapons on Japan. He'd ended the war. He commanded the most powerful military in human history. But he looked at Leonard Funk and recognized something he himself would never possess: the pure, distilled courage to stand alone against impossible odds and fight anyway. The tragedy of Leonard Funk's story is the quiet. Funk went home. He got a job with the Veterans Administration. He helped other veterans with paperwork. For 27 years, he sat at a desk. The man who'd killed 21 Germans in 60 seconds spent the rest of his life processing disability claims. Maybe Funk wanted that quiet life. Maybe after everything he'd personally seen and done, a desk job felt like peace. Maybe helping other veterans gave him purpose that combat never could. We don't know. Funk never talked about it. When people asked about the war, about Holzheim, about the laughter, he dismissed. It did what was required. 4 words, that's all he gave them. But those 4 words contain everything. Did what was required, not what was ordered, not what was expected, not what was probable or possible or rational, what was required. Leonard Funk assessed the situation at Holzheim and determined that surrender was not required. Fighting was required. Killing was required. Surviving, if possible. But survival wasn't the requirement. The requirement was fighting until he couldn't fight anymore. That's the lesson of Leonard Funk. That's what the Medal of Honor citation really honors. Not the killing, not the victory. The decision. The moment when Leonard Funk looked at 90 Germans and decided he would rather die fighting than live surrendering. Everything else, the laughter, the shooting, the bodies in the snow, all of that followed from that single decision. War is full of heroes. Most of them are forgotten. Their citations gather dust in military archives. Their medals sit in display cases. Their names fade from living memory. But some heroes, a very few, transcend their specific actions and become symbols. Leonard Funk became one of those symbols. Not because he killed 21 Germans, plenty of soldiers killed more. Not because he survived against impossible odds, plenty of soldiers got lucky. Leonard Funk became a symbol because of the laughter. Because in the moment of maximum danger, facing certain death, he laughed. And then he fought. And then he won. That laughter echoes through military history. It says something about courage that can't be said any other way. It says that courage isn't grim determination or stoic acceptance. Sometimes courage is laughing at death because the alternative, surrendering to death, is unacceptable. Sometimes courage is finding the absurd humor in impossible situations. Sometimes courage is laughing so hard you can barely breathe while you're reaching for your weapon to kill everyone trying to kill you. Leonard Funk died in 1992. They buried him at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. The Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, foreign decorations from 3 Allied nations, the most decorated paratrooper of World War II, 5'5", 140 pounds, a clerk before the war, a clerk after the war, and in between, for a few years in the 1940s, one of the most dangerous men alive. That's the story of Leonard Funk. Not just what he did, but what he chose. At Holzheim, he chose to laugh and fight rather than surrender and possibly survive. That choice killed 21 men and saved more lives. His 4 guards, his scattered company members who would have been attacked from behind. Potentially, the entire operation at Holzheim that could have collapsed if 90 Germans had escaped and rejoined the fight. But Leonard Funk wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about Malmedy. He was thinking about 84 murdered Americans. He was thinking, not me, not today, not ever. And then he laughed and killed his way out of the impossible situation and lived when he should have died and went home when the war ended and spent 27 years helping other veterans with their paperwork. The man who laughed at death went home and lived quietly. The man who killed 21 Germans in 60 seconds went home and processed disability claims. The most decorated paratrooper of World War II went home and never talked about it. Did what was required. That's all. That's everything.